All right, hi everyone. This video is going to be a little bit longer. We're going to go over your root cause analysis assignment. So that's for skill set 2. This is a lesson about what root cause analysis is. It's a causal factor charting method that was developed in Japan by Honda. And it's a method that, so many organizations use. It's used worldwide. And it's considered to be the primary method for doing root cause analysis. All right, so this is what we would be doing in class together. I expect you guys to be thinking through this and pausing the video and looking at the root cause analysis handout that's on Moodle. Okay, so what is the definition of root cause analysis? Root causes are specific underlying causes. That means that there are causes that might not be seen right away, but if you dig a little bit, meaning you do a little bit of research or investigation, you'll find them there. Root causes are those that can reasonably be identified. So that means that they have to be accessible to you. They can't be so obscure that you're not able to really see them or that you have to reach and make an argument for them. Root causes are those management has control to fix. So if we don't have control over the root causes, then they're not going to be useful to us, right? So things like the weather we don't have control over, but we do have control over how we deal with the weather. So don't ever identify the weather as a root cause, but how we accommodate or deal with the weather. And root causes are those for which effective recommendations for preventing reoccurrences can be generated. All right, so what that means is that you have to be able to recommend a solution for a root cause and that particular solution will prevent the problem from happening again. So let's dig into this a little bit. We can't do this together online, but you can do it at home. These root causes are in the handout that I have on Moodle, so you can take a look at these. You can pause the video and read through these. They explain each of the 4 definitions for root causes. Okay, so this is referring to the handout that's on Moodle. Let's just take a look at that handout real quick. It's in PDF form. This is what it looks like. It defines root causes here. And then it goes through an example. Okay, so this is charting. It's a causal factor chart for a particular root cause. Let's go over the for a particular incident that happened. Let's just go over the scenario together. So the scenario is about a fire that occurred in a woman's apartment. Here's what the fire department determined. It was 5 p.m. This is an account of the fire and how it happened. Mary is the name of the person whose apartment it is, and this is what she told the fire investigators. It was 5 p.m. I was frying chicken. My friend Jane stopped by on her way home from the doctor, and she was very upset. I invited her into the living room so we could talk. After about 10 minutes, the smoke detector near the kitchen came on. I ran into the kitchen and found a fire on the stove. I reached for the fire extinguisher and pulled the plug. Nothing happened. The fire extinguisher was not charged. In desperation, I threw water on the fire. The fire spread throughout the kitchen. I called the fire department, but the kitchen was destroyed. The fire department arrived in time to save the rest of the house. Okay, so let's take a look at the chart. Mary, she told the fire department about that. They did an investigation and then they charted the causal factors for the fire. So please pause the video, open the handout that's on Moodle, and read through this chart. It's figure 1. It's the causal factor chart. It's on the 3rd and 4th page. So I want you to pause the video and read through this chart. Great, okay, presumably you paused the video. I'm counting on everyone to do that and to read through the chart. My first question is, how did you read it? And generally, students in class answer that question of, I read it from top to bottom. So how did you read it? Did you read it from top to bottom? Did you start up here? Sometimes students say they read it from left to right. So they started over here and they moved this way. And then I usually ask, how did you read this page then? And they say the same way. Some students, when I ask how they read it, they said that they read from the top and then over and down, over and down. So they sort of read it like a horizon, right? And a sun setting on it. So how did you read it? So the way that you should read a chart like this is you start at the very beginning, right? You start with the known factor. And we know from what Mary said is that it was 5 p.m. and she was frying chicken. So that's the first thing that the investigators know. And they start here. Mary begins frying chicken, right? There's a few details that they chart. So Mary uses an aluminum pan, and then they have some questions about it. You read the chart from left to right, and then you see with each factor of what we know, there are a couple things that influence that factor. So first Mary begins frying the chicken, then Mary leaves the frying chicken unattended. These are the contributing factors. Jane comes to the door, she rings the doorbell, so she leaves the frying chicken. This is how you read the chart. Then you move over here. The fire starts on the stove. Mary meets with Jane, and then they've timed it 10 minutes, because that's what Mary said. Okay, so there are some contributing factors here. The electric burner shorts out. That contributes to the arching heat bottom of the aluminum pan. The arching heats the bottom. The aluminum melts, forming a hole in the pan. Grease ignites when it contacts the burner. And then we're back at what those contributing factors contributed to. Then we move over to the right again. The smoke detector alarms. Fire generates smoke. Great. So they know in this case that there was an actual fire, that it generated the smoke detector worked. It's about 5:10 p.m. So there's a timestamp there. So go ahead and pause the video and just, if you didn't read through it this way the first time, pause the video and read through it again in this way, right? So we have our through line here, and you can see that these boxes are dark and that the arrows are dark and that they have contributing factors, right? So go ahead and read through it and notice the patterns that are used in charting it. Great, presumably you paused the video, you read through it again. Here's hoping. Okay, the other thing to notice is that there are different shapes and clues that help this person chart their investigation. There are bold boxes, there are not bold boxes, there are diamonds with questions, there are timestamps some places, there's the CF, the causal factor, little badge on some of these things. Pay attention to those things. So they're just basically coding their investigation. And then there are some black boxes over here. This is the outcome, right? The black box is at the end. And if you don't know what a black box is, it's a euphemism for something that holds all the necessary information or the answers. For instance, like computer systems have black boxes. Airplane systems have black boxes. They're basically digital systems that hold information that provides answers to questions. Okay, so the next question is, how do you think this chart was developed? How do you think this chart was developed? So pause the video, think about it, try to come up with an answer. Maybe look through the chart again. All right, presuming you paused and you actually thought through it, yay, critical thinking. The answer is that it's developed from backwards, right? From the end to the beginning. So development always starts at the end because that is always a known fact. Logic and time tests are used to build the chart back to the beginning of the event. Numerous questions are usually generated that identify additional necessary data. All right, so we see that charted here. Here's the known factor: kitchen destroyed by the fire, other losses from smoke and water damage, yeah, perhaps. And they basically just retrace the steps of the fire. So this is how almost all major investigations go. If you guys ever watch like procedural crime TV shows like Sherlock or I don't know, there's so many. There's 100 procedural crime TV shows. Law and Order is like the most famous one now. But they always start at the end, right? They always start by standing over the dead body and taking a look at what the facts are right in front of them. And then they work back. And they identify witnesses, they follow clues, they follow DNA, and they work back to the very beginning to the beginning of the crime. So this is what we do always when we're doing root cause analysis. We start at the end and we work our way back. That's what you guys are going to be doing on for your own problems. You start at the known factor. You start at the problem itself. You work backwards through the causes of the problems. After the causal factor chart is complete, analysts identify the factors that influence the course of events. And for this particular chart, there are 4 causal factors in this event, and they show that in Table 1. So let's go back there again. Okay, it's on page 6. It's figure 2. Oh, sorry, that is not it. The table, okay, it's on page 8. It's called Table 1. It's the root cause summary table. Okay, so they have causal factor 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we actually saw that charted here. So CF is causal factor, electric burner shorts out. She leaves the frying chicken unattended. The fire extinguisher doesn't operate when she tries to use it. And there's another one somewhere. She throws water on the fire. Oops. Okay, so we can see this table. They have it by factor in this column. The path through the root cause map, so they're looking at their chart that they did above and they've written it out here. And then they have certain recommendations so that the problem doesn't recur. So remember, you want to find causal factors for which you can recommend something, a solution, so that the problem doesn't occur again. Okay, so there are different types of factors here. And I've written a few of these types here. There are environmental factors, equipment factors, human factors, historical, social, or psychological, communication, information, or technological. So pause the video and just read through those. What do you think each of these means? So environmental factors are things about how our world is made up, our physical world, geologically, oftentimes. Sometimes, that includes weather, but it also includes weather conditions, right? That includes things like how much water is there in the air, what is the soil like, what's the composition of whatever natural materials we're using. Is the terrain hilly? Is it flat? Is it moist? Is it dry? These are all environmental factors that cause certain types of problems. And environmental factors can also be attributed to in our homes, right? So maybe the air in our home is particularly dry in the winter because we have the heaters going a lot. Um, so think about things like that when you're thinking about causal factors for your particular problem. I think equipment is pretty self-explanatory. Whatever tools or equipment you're using, how well they work might be a factor in your problem that you're trying to solve. Right? So imagine that you're trying to solve some sort of problem like traffic in Suli. There might be some equipment factors. Maybe the types of cars or vehicles that we're using are a factor. Maybe the type of cement that we're using is a factor because it degrades and there are potholes. You can be thinking deeply about these things. Human factors are just how capable are people. So maybe traffic in Suli has to do with how well we drive, right? Not so much the cars that we're driving, but if we're knowledgeable and trained in driving. Historical, social, or psychological, these factors are really, really important. And and they're very difficult for students in general, for students to identify. But think about Mary. Where is it? Where she throws water on the fire here. So this is a human factor. She's not properly trained, I think, in the different types of fires and how to treat them. But it might also be psychological. Maybe she panics when she's afraid or she's very fear-driven. And maybe she does know how to treat fires, but when she's in a crisis situation, maybe that's triggering for her and she panics, right? Also think about cultural factors. That's part of the sort of historical or psychological category. Here, most people just throw rugs on fires because we have rugs around. But, we wouldn't do that necessarily in the US because we don't have that many rugs around, depending on how we live. So there are some cultural factors that are more evident. If you're working on a social problem, like educational systems or accommodating people with disabilities or depression, there are tons of cultural and social factors that contribute to that problem. So that's a really important one to think about. So communication is about being human and so being in society as well. But we can get more specific about how are we communicating with each other. So if you're particularly looking at a problem that's in the workplace or something like that, and there are some problems coming up, maybe one of the factors is that we're not communicating well. Is it all through email? Is it all through memo? Are we just communicating by shouting to each other over our desks? These are good questions to ask, and then you can ask questions about how that type of communication contributes to the problems that we're seeing. This could also be true, like in the ministry, communicating between that institution and then the institutions that the ministry is overseeing. How does that communication happen? Are the right people being communicated to? These are deep questions that you guys should be thinking about. And finally, I have down here information or technological. So is the information faulty? These are deep questions that need to be answered in a lot of the problems that you guys have chosen. Okay, so just pause the video and go back to this table and try to figure out what type of factor each of these is, right? So I already did causal factor 4 for you. See if you can do 3, 2, and 1. And you don't have to stick with just the factors that I brought up. We're really just trying to categorize causes, right? So if you think of another category to put these causal factors in, go ahead and do that. So when you're doing a causal factor analysis, it's really the what, how, and why that you're trying to answer. And an analyst has to be willing to probe the data, so investigate the data first to determine what happened during the occurrence, how it happened, and then finally why it happened. So what, how, and why are really important, but it's even more important that you answer those questions in this order. So what first? Those are the facts that you start with. How? That's the process. And then why? The cause. So you have to answer the questions in these orders. For our second skill set, you guys have to develop an Ishikawa diagram. And this is it's a chart that shows that you've categorized causal factors for your particular problem. This diagram intends to reveal key relationships among various variables. Sorry, that's a little redundant. The variables that cause your problem and the possible causes. So these two revelations can provide insight into basically the behavior or the process that causes the problem that you're trying to solve. Ishikawa is a guy who, do I explain this here? Yeah. So, not Honda, Toyota. He worked for Toyota in the 60s. They were having some manufacturing errors, and Ishikawa is a guy who came up with this problem-solving method. It's just root cause analysis, and he came up with a framework for charting the causes of their problems. Initially, and you can Google this, it's on Wikipedia, and it talks a lot about it if you're interested. But I find it to be interesting because I like methodologies and frameworks for investigating problems. It makes it easier for me. Rather than just starting with a bunch of data, Ishikawa systematized how to chart the data, and I think that that's helpful. You can pause the video and read through this or look at the slides, but I don't want this video to go on and on and on, so we're going to keep going. Here's an example of an Ishikawa diagram. This is a pretty serious problem. It's maternal death, so mothers who are dying in childbirth. And they have a whole bunch of causal factors here. All of these are causal factors. And what these are up here are categories, right? So they're categories like I've listed here. But they've listed a few different categories. So individual staff, task factors, patient characteristics, work environment, organizational and management factors, and team factors. Okay, so their categories look different. Their categories are very specific to their problem and the context of their problem, which is in hospitals. Notice that the categories are not causal factors. So these categories up here and down here are not causal factors. Here's the problem, here are the categories, and here on each of these lines is a causal factor. So nurse distractions and nurse fatigue. This is under the category of individual staff. These might be causal factors that lead to maternal death. Task factors. Lack of protocol for retrieval and administration of epidural meds. So this is about protocol, which is about policies and communication, I think, right? So protocol is how are nurses and doctors expected to perform and proceed when there is a problem. So maybe there's a lack of protocol. Oops, sorry. Patient characteristics. So young age of patient and prima gravida. These are not things that we have control over, right? So we can't control the age of the mother. We can't control if she's giving birth early or not. So they're not going to be that helpful. We can't solve these particular causal factors, but they may contribute to some other things here. And remember, one of the things that we're trying to do is identify relationships among the variables. So that's why they include that there. For skill set 2, you have to come up with your own Ishikawa chart, this diagram here, right? You can find templates online. It's really easy. Just Google it. Or you can draw your own in a Word document. That's fine to do. But you have to chart it like this. You have to put the problem here, and you have to come up with categories. A lot of what we do in life for work and in our lives is to categorize information. Our brains are doing it all the time. You guys have to work and think critically to categorize the causal factors for your problems. So that's your task for skill set 2. Let's just take a look. I detail what to do here in my writing. I have some factors here, but you guys can come up with different categories if you want. It's no problem. I have a few other examples here. Same one there. There are some links to how to construct this thing. And you guys should reach out either in the forum at the top of our Moodle page or email me for questions. Okay, thank you very much.